Hello kids, so today we will be doing our first chapter, the French Revolution, and we will be covering this chapter in just 50 minutes of time. So, let's start. Chapter 1, the French Revolution. On the morning of 14 July 1789, the city of Paris was in a state of alarm. The king had commanded troops to move into the city. Rumors spread that he would soon order the army to open fire upon the citizens. Some 7,000 men and women gathered in front of the town hall and decided to form a people's militia. They broke into a number of government buildings in search of arms because they also want to defend themselves. Finally, a group of several hundred people marched towards the eastern part of the city and stormed the fortress prison, the Bastille, where they hoped to find hoarded ammunition. In the armed fight that followed, the commander of the Bastille was killed and the prisoners released, though there were only 7 of them. Yet the Bastille was hated by all because it stood for the despotic power of the king. The fortress was demolished and its stone fragments were sold in the market to all those who wished to keep a souvenir of its destruction, or means who want to keep it like as a memory. Okay. The days that followed saw more rioting both in Paris and the countryside. Most people were protesting against the high price of bread. Much later, when historians look back upon this time, they saw it as the beginning of a chain of events that ultimately led to the execution of the king in France, though most people at the time did not anticipate this outcome. Now, how and why this happened? Let's find out. Before that, let's see this figure 1, storming of the Bastille. Soon after the demolition of the Bastille, artists made prints commemorating the event. Okay. Now, French society during the late 18th century. In 1774, Louis XVI of the Bourbon family of kings ascended the throne of France. At that time, he was only 20 years old and married to the Austrian princess Marie Antoinette. Upon his accession, the new king found an empty treasury because there was nothing much left. Long years of war had drained the financial resources of France. Added to this was the cost of maintaining an extravagant court at the immense palace of Versailles. Under Louis XVI, France helped the 13 American colonies to gain their independence from the common enemy Britain. The war added more than a billion livres to a debt that had already risen to more than 2 billion livres. Lenders who gave the state credit now began to charge 10% interest on loans. So the French government was obliged to spend an increasing percentage of its budget on interest payments alone. To meet its regular expenses, such as the cost of maintaining an army, the court, running government offices or universities, the state was forced to increase taxes. Yet even this measure would not have sufficed. French society in the 18th century was divided into 3 estates, and only members of the third estate paid taxes. Okay. So before proceeding to this next paragraph, let's read about the 3 estates we are talking about. Okay, so here you can see on the right hand side this flow chart. So the first estate belongs to the clergy, second estate belongs to nobility, and the third estate includes big businessmen, merchants, court officials, lawyers, etc. Also peasants and artisans, also small peasants, landless labor and servants. So this part of the society was only paying the taxes. See, this figure is a society of estates. Note that within the third estate, some were rich and others poor. Yeah, this class is very poor. See, small peasants, landless labor servants, they are poor. Now come back to our paragraph. The society of estates was part of the feudal system that dated back to the Middle Ages. The term old regime is usually used to describe the society and institutions of France before 1789. Now figure 2. This figure 2 we have already studied shows how the system of estates in French society was organized. Peasants made up about 90% of the population. However, only a small number of them owned the land they cultivated. About 60% of the land was owned by nobles, the church, and other richer members of the third estate. The members of the first 2 states, that is the clergy and the nobility, enjoyed certain privileges by birth. Now, who are clergy? See, here you can see on the right hand side these 4 definitions, and you have to learn these. So clergy are group of persons invested with special functions in the church. Okay. So now let's come back again to this line and read this. As you know the meaning now, the members of the first two estates, that is the clergy and the nobility, enjoyed certain privileges by birth. Okay, so they are invested with special functions in the church. Okay, the most important of these was exemption from paying taxes to the state. The nobles further enjoyed feudal privileges. These included feudal dues which they extracted from the peasants. Peasants were obliged to render services to the lord, to work in his house and fields, to serve in the army, or to participate in building roads. The church too extracted its share of taxes called tithes from the peasants. Now what is a tithe? A tax levied by the church comprising 1/10 of the agricultural produce. So now as we know the definition of the word, let's read this line again. The church too extracted its share of taxes called tithes from the peasants. And finally, all members of the third estate had to pay taxes to the state. These included a direct tax called tallier and a number of indirect taxes which were levied on articles of everyday consumption like salt or tobacco. The burden of financing activities of the state through taxes was borne by the third estate alone. Now, before proceeding to the next page, let's read all these definitions, and please, these are very important, learn them. So, livre is unit of currency in France, discontinued in 1794. Clergy, we have already gone through this, group of persons invested with special functions in the church. Then the thing, a tax levied by the church comprising 1/10 of the agricultural produce. Then taille, tax to be paid directly to the state. Okay, so this is a direct tax. Now let's read this figure. See, this poor fellow brings everything, grain, fruits, money, salad. The fat lord sits there ready to accept it all. He does not even care to grace him with a look. Okay, so this poor man is bringing all this. Here you can see this noble man for whom he is bringing, the poor man is bringing the items, is the spider. The peasant, the fly. Okay, this is the spider. And this, the more the devil has, the more he wants. Okay, the more the person has, the more he wants. The wants, they never end. The needs, they never end. Okay. So this figure 3, the spider and the fly. And anonymous etching. See here in this picture, why this nobleman is called the spider? Because he is trapping. He is actually exploiting this poor man, which is like a fly. And he is trapping him in his trap. And he is eating him. Actually, he is finishing him. Okay. So that is why the nobleman is called the spider and the peasant is called the fly. Because spider always traps the flies in its web and eats them. Okay. Now the next topic, the struggle to survive. The population of France rose from about 23 million in 1715 to 28 million in 1789. This led to a rapid increase in the demand for food grains. Production of grains could not keep pace with the demand, so the price of bread, which was the staple diet of the majority, rose rapidly. Now because of all this, French Revolution was started, because they were protesting against the increased price of bread. Now most workers were employed as laborers in workshops whose owner fixed their wages, but wages did not keep pace with the rise in prices. So the gap between the poor and the rich widened. What happened was, wages were not increasing, but the prices in the market were increasing. So the people have less money and more to pay. Okay, that is why the gap between the poor and the rich widened. Things become worse whenever drought or hail reduce the harvest. Okay, now things become more worse whenever drought. Drought means sukha par jana, when there is very less crop. Okay, so less crop means less grains and more prices for it. This led to a subsistence crisis, something that occurred frequently in France during the old regime. Okay. Now what is subsistence crisis? Let's read this definition on the right hand side. An extreme situation where the basic means of livelihood are endangered. Anonymous, one whose name remains unknown. Now this 1.2. How a subsistence crisis happens. See, bad harvest. Okay. You have to complete this actually. So this bad harvest will lead to what? Scarcity of grains. And scarcity of grains will lead to what? Rising high prices. Okay, rising food prices. There will be rise prices. Okay, so the people have to pay more prices for the same quantity. Then what will happen? The poorest can no longer buy bread, and if the poorest can no longer buy the bread, they will not be able to eat. What will happen? Weaker bodies will lead to diseases, and diseases will lead to large number of deaths. Okay, and then if I'll come to this square, what you will fill here is roids for food. That is why all this happened. So roids started because of the food. Okay, so I will also share this flowchart later with proper solutions. Okay, now a growing middle class envisages an end to privileges. Okay, in the past, peasants and workers had participated in revolts against increasing taxes and food scarcity, but they lacked the means and programs to carry out full scale measures that would bring about a change in the social and economic order. This was left to those groups within the third estate who had become prosperous and had access to education and new ideas. The 18th century witnessed the emergence of social groups, termed the middle class, who earned their wealth through an expanding overseas trade and from the manufacture of goods such as woolen and silk textiles that were either exported or bought by the richer members of society. In addition to merchants and manufacturers, the third estate included professions such as lawyers or administrative officials. All of these were educated and believed that no group in society should be privileged by birth. Rather, a person's social position must depend on his merit. Okay, so on his capability. Okay, these ideas envisaging a society based on freedom and equal laws and opportunities for all were put forward by philosophers such as John Locke and Jean Jacques Rousseau. In his two treatises of government, Locke sought to refute the doctrine of the divine and absolute right of the monarch. Rousseau carried the idea forward, proposing a form of government based on a social contract between people and the representatives. In the spirit of the laws, Montesquieu proposed a division of power within the government between the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. This model of government was put into force in the USA after the 13 colonies declared their independence from Britain. The American Constitution and its guarantee of individual rights was an important example for political thinkers in France. The ideas of these philosophers were discussed intensively in salons and coffee houses and spread among people through books and newspapers. These were frequently read aloud in groups for the benefit of those who could not read and write. The news that Louis XVI planned to impose further taxes to be able to meet the expenses of the state generated anger and protest against the system of privileges. Now, this is source A, accounts of live experiences in the old regime. Georges Danton, who later became active in revolutionary politics, wrote to a friend in 1793, looking back upon the time when he had just completed his studies. I was educated in the residential college of Plessis. There I was in the company of important men. Once my studies ended, I was left with nothing. I started looking for a post. It was impossible to find one at the law courts in Paris. The choice of a career in the army was not open to me as I was not a noble by birth, nor did I have a patron. The church too could not offer me a refuge. I could not buy an office as I did not possess a sou. My old friends turned their backs to me. The system had provided us with an education without, however, offering a field where our talents could be utilized. So education was there, but employment was not there. Then number two, an Englishman, Arthur Young, traveled through France during the years from 1787 to 1789 and wrote detailed descriptions of his journeys. He often commented on what he saw. He who decides to be served and waited upon by slaves, ill-treated slaves at that, must be fully aware that by doing so he is placing his property and his life in a situation which is very different from that he could be in. Had he chosen the services of free and well-treated men, and he chooses to dine to the accompaniment of his victim's groans, should not complain if during a riot his daughter gets kidnapped or his son's throat is split. Okay. Now the outbreak of revolution. Louis XVI had to increase taxes for reasons you have learned in the previous section. How do you think he could have gone about doing this? In France of the old regime, the monarch did not have the power to impose taxes according to his will alone. Rather, he had to call a meeting of the Estates General, which could then pass his proposals for new taxes. The Estates General was a political body to which the three states sent their representatives. Okay, the three states. We have already read about them. However, the monarch alone could decide when to call a meeting of his body. The last time it was done was in 1614. On May 5, 1789, Louis XVI called together an assembly of the Estates General to pass proposals for new taxes. A resplendent hall in Versailles was prepared to host the delegates. The first and second estates sent 300 representatives each, who were seated in rows facing each other on two sides, while the 600 members of the third estate had to stand at the back. The third estate was represented by its more prosperous and educated members. Now see, now they were more educated and they were more prosperous. Still, they were not treated the same as the estate 1 and estate 2. Okay. Peasants, artisans, and women were denied entry to the assembly. So peasants, artisans, and women were totally denied entry to the assembly. However, their grievances and demands were listed in some 40,000 letters which the representatives had brought with them. Voting in the Estates General in the past had been conducted according to the principle that each estate had one vote. This time, too, Louis XVI was determined to continue the same practice, but members of the third estate demanded that voting now be conducted by the assembly as a whole, where each member would have one vote. This was one of the democratic principles put forward by philosophers like Rousseau in his book The Social Contract. When the king rejected this proposal, members of the third estate walked out of the assembly in protest. The representatives of the third estate viewed themselves as spokesmen for the whole French nation. On 20th June, they assembled in the hall of an indoor tennis court in the ground of Versailles. They declared themselves a national assembly and swore not to disperse till they had drafted a constitution for France that would limit the powers of the monarch. They were led by Mirabeau and Abbé Sieyès. Mirabeau was born in a noble family but was convinced of the need to do away with the society of feudal privilege. He brought out a general and delivered powerful speeches to the crowd assembled at Versailles. Now, before proceeding to the next page, let's read this green box on the right hand side, some important dates. 1774. Louis XVI becomes King of France, faces empty treasury and growing discontent within society of the old regime. Then 1789, convocation of Estates General. Third estate forms National Assembly. The Bastille is stormed, peasants revolt in the countryside. 1791, a constitution is framed to limit the powers of the king and to guarantee basic rights to all human beings. 1792 to 93, France becomes a republic. The king is beheaded. Overthrow of the Jacobin Republic, a directory rules France. 1804, Napoleon becomes Emperor of France, annexes large parts of Europe. Then 1815, Napoleon defeated at Waterloo. Now this is a timeline, and please learn all these dates. Okay, these are very important. This timeline is very important again. Abbé Sieyès, originally a priest, wrote an influential pamphlet called What is the Third Estate? While the National Assembly was busy at Versailles drafting a constitution, the rest of France seethed with turmoil. A severe winter had meant a bad harvest, the price of bread rose. Often bakers exploited the situation and hoarded supplies. After spending hours in long queues at the bakery, crowds of angry women stormed up into the shops. At the same time, the king ordered troops to move into Paris. On 14 July, the agitated crowd stormed and destroyed the Bastille. In the countryside, rumors spread from village to village that the lords of the manor, now what is a manor? An estate consisting of the lord's lands and his mansion, okay, had hired bands of brigands who were on their way to destroy the rice crops. Caught in a frenzy of fear, peasants in several districts seized hoes and pitchforks and attacked chateaux. What is chateau? Here you can see the definition: castle or stately residence belonging to a king or the noble men. Now the chateau, they looted, hoarded grain and burned down documents containing records of manorial dues. A large number of nobles fled from their homes, many of them migrating to neighboring countries. Faced with the power of his revolting subjects, Louis XVI finally accorded recognition to the National Assembly and accepted the principle that his powers would from now on be checked by a constitution. So on the night of 4th August 1789, the Assembly passed a decree abolishing the feudal system of obligations and taxes. Members of the clergy too were forced to give up their privileges. Tithes were abolished and lands owned by the church were confiscated. As a result, the government acquired assets worth at least 2 billion livres. Right? Now, before proceeding to the next topic, let's see this figure 6. The spread of the Great Fear. The map shows how bands of peasants spread from one point to another. You can see these arrows, right? Now, the next topic. France becomes a constitutional monarchy. The National Assembly completed the draft of the Constitution in 1791. Its main object was to limit the powers of the monarch. These powers, instead of being concentrated in the hands of one person, were now separated and assigned to different institutions: the legislature, executive, and judiciary. This made France a constitutional monarchy. Now this figure 7, this explains how the new political system worked. So you can see here clearly that judiciary includes judge, executive includes the king, right, and ministers as well. Then legislature includes National Assembly and electors, right, and the people who were above 25 years of age and men, only men, they were entitled to vote. Okay. Now let's read a detailed description about this figure 7, the political system under the Constitution of 1791. So the Constitution of 1791 vested the power to make laws in the National Assembly, which was indirectly elected. That is, citizens voted for a group of electors who in turn chose the assembly. Not all citizens, however, had the right to vote. Only men above 25 years of age who paid taxes to at least 3 days of a laborer's wage were given the status of active citizens. That is, they were entitled to vote. The remaining men and all women were classed as passive citizens. Here you can see in this figure, women, children and youth below 25, they are considered passive citizens, and who all are considered no voting rights to about 3 million men. 3 million men means the men who are below 25 years of age. Okay. To qualify as an elector and then as a member of the assembly, a man had to belong to the highest bracket of taxpayers. Now this is figure 8, which says the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, painted by the artist Le Barbier in 1790. The figure on the right represents France. The figure on the left symbolizes the law. Now source C. Let's read this first, this box. The Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. What it says? That men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Okay. The aim of every political association is the preservation of the natural and inalienable rights of man. These are liberty, property, security and resistance to oppression. Then third one, the source of all sovereignty resides in the nation. No group or individual may exercise authority that does not come from the people. Fourth, liberty consists of the power to do whatever is not injurious to others. Then 5, the law has the right to forbid only actions that are injurious to society. Then 6, law is the expression of the general will. All citizens have the right to participate in its formation personally or through their representatives. All citizens are equal before it. Then 7th, no man may be accused, arrested or detained except in cases determined by the law. Then after 7 point, you can see here 11th point directly. Every citizen may speak, write and print freely. He must take responsibility for the abuse of such liberty in cases determined by the law. Then 12th point, for the maintenance of the public force and for the expenses of administration, a common tax is indispensable. It must be assessed equally on all citizens in proportion to their means. Then 17th, since property is a sacred and inviolable right, no one may be deprived of it. unless a legally established public necessity requires it. In that case, a just compensation must be given in advance. Now come back to our paragraph. We are here. The Constitution began with the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. Rights such as the right to life, freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, equality before law were established as natural and inalienable rights, that is, they belong to each human being by birth and could not be taken away. It was a duty of the state to protect each citizen's natural rights. Now, here we have read about source C. Here we have source B as well. Let's read this also. The revolutionary journalist Jean-Paul Marat commented in his newspaper L'Ami du Peuple, the friend of the people, on the constitution drafted by the National Assembly. The task of representing the people had been given to the rich. The lot of the poor and oppressed will never be improved by peaceful means alone. Here, we have absolute proof of how wealth influences the law. Yet laws will last only as long as the people agree to obey them. And when they have managed to cast off the yoke of the aristocrats, they will do the same to the other owners of wealth. So this is an extract from newspaper L'Ami du Peuple, which means the friend of the people. Now box 1. Reading political symbols. The majority of men and women in the 18th century could not read or write. So images and symbols were frequently used instead of printed words to communicate important ideas. Okay. So the painting by Le Barbier uses many such symbols to convey the content of the Declaration of Rights. Let us try to read these symbols. The broken chain. Chains were used to fetter slaves. A broken chain stands for the act of becoming free. So the symbol indicates that a person is free now, right? Then the bundle of rods or fasces. One rod can be easily broken but not an entire bundle. Strength lies in unity. Then the eye within a triangle radiating light. See, you can see an eye within a triangle and it is radiating light here, right? This means the all-seeing eye stands for knowledge. The rays of the sun will drive away the clouds of ignorance. Then this is a scepter, symbol of a royal power. Then this is snake biting its tail to form a ring. The snake is biting its own tail in the form of a ring. This is a symbol of eternity. A ring has neither beginning nor end. Then red Phrygian cap. Cap worn by a slave upon becoming free. Now if a person is wearing this red cap, it means the slave has become free now. Then blue, white, red. The national colors of France. Okay, blue, white and red. See, you can see blue, white and red. Then the winged woman, personification of the law. Here we have already studied. See here in this figure. Here on the left symbolizes the law and the right one is represents France. Okay, because there are three colors of the flag: blue, red and white. Then the law tablet. The law is the same for all and all are equal before it, right? So third point, France abolishes monarchy and becomes a republic. The situation in France continued to be tense during the following years. Although Louis XVI had signed the constitution, he entered into secret negotiations with the King of Prussia. Rulers of other neighboring countries too were worried by the developments in France and made plans to send troops to put down the events that had been taking place there since the summer of 1789. Before this could happen, the National Assembly voted in April 1792 to declare war against Prussia and Austria. Thousands of volunteers thronged from the provinces to join the army. They saw this as a war of the people against kings and aristocracies all over Europe. Among the patriotic songs they sang was the Marseillaise, composed by poet Roger de Lille. It was sung for the first time by volunteers from Marseille as they marched into Paris and so got its name. The Marseillaise is now the national anthem of France. The Revolutionary Wars brought losses and economic difficulties to the people. While the men were away fighting at the front, women were left to cope with the task of earning a living and looking after their families. Large sections of the population were convinced that the revolution had to be carried further, as the Constitution of 1791 gave political rights only to the richer sections of society. Political clubs became an important rallying point for the people who wished to discuss government policies and plan their own forms of action. The most successful of these clubs was that of the Jacobins, which got its name from the former convent of Saint Jacobin, Paris. Women too, who had been active throughout this period, formed their own clubs. So section 4 of this chapter will tell you more about the activities and demands. The members of the Jacobin club belonged mainly to the less prosperous sections of the society. They included small shopkeepers, artisans such as shoemakers, pastry cooks, watchmakers, printers, as well as servants and daily wage workers. So people who were not very prosperous, who were in the middle section, right? Middle class people. The leader was Maximilien Robespierre. A large group among the Jacobins decided to start wearing long striped trousers similar to those worn by dock workers, as you can see here on the right hand side this picture. This was to set themselves apart from the fashionable sections of society, especially nobles who wore knee breeches. Okay, so before proceeding, let's read what was about. We have read a new word here, convent. So what is convent? Let's see. Building belonging to a community devoted to a religious life. Okay, so now, and here also this figure 10 you can see, this is Nanine Valley in Liberty. This is one of rare paintings by a woman artist. The revolutionary events made it possible for women to train with established painters and to exhibit their works in the Salon, which was an exhibition held every 2 years. The painting is a female allegory of liberty, that is the female form symbolizes the idea of freedom. Now it was a way of proclaiming the end of the power wielded by the wearers of knee breeches. These Jacobins came to be known as the sans culottes, literally meaning those who are without knee breeches. So sans culottes men wore in addition the red cap that symbolized liberty. Women, however, were not allowed to do so. In the summer of 1792, the Jacobins planned an insurrection of a large number of Parisians who were angered by the short supplies and high prices of food. On the morning of August 10, they stormed the palace of the Tuileries, massacred the king's guards, and held the king himself as hostage for several hours. Later, the assembly voted to imprison the royal family. Elections were held. From now on, all men of 21 years and above, regardless of wealth, got the right to vote. The newly elected assembly was called the Convention. On 21st September 1792, it abolished the monarchy and declared France a republic. As you know, a republic is a form of government where the people elect the government, including the head of the government. There is no hereditary monarchy. You can try and find out about some other countries as well that are republics and investigate when, how, and they became so. And you can answer about these in the comment section. Louis XVI was sentenced to death by a court on the charge of treason. What is treason? Treason is betrayal of one's country or government, right? So he was charged for that. On 21st January 1793, he was executed publicly at Place de la Concorde. The Queen Marie Antoinette met with the same fate shortly after. Now the next topic, the Reign of Terror. The period from 1793 to 1794, the whole 1 year, is referred to as the Reign of Terror. Now why? Robespierre followed a policy of severe control and punishment. All those whom he saw as being enemies of the Republic, ex-nobles and clergy, members of other political parties, even members of his own party, who did not agree with his methods, were arrested, imprisoned, and then tried by a revolutionary tribunal. If the court found them guilty, they were guillotined. The guillotine is a device consisting of 2 poles and a blade with which a person is beheaded, right? His head is cut, okay? So it was named after Dr. Guillotine, who invented it. Robespierre government issued laws placing a maximum ceiling on wages and prices. Meat and bread were rationed. Peasants were forced to transport their grain to the cities and sell it as prices fixed by the government. The use of more expensive white flour was forbidden. All citizens were required to eat the pain d'galette, means equality, just equal as of a bread, okay? A loaf made of whole wheat, okay? So it was a bread which is made up of whole wheat. Equality was also sought to be practiced through forms of speech and address. Instead of the traditional monsieur, means sir, and madame, Madame or Madam, all French men and women were henceforth citoyen and citoyenne citizen. Okay. Churches were shut down and their buildings converted into barracks or offices. Robespierre pursued his policies so relentlessly that even his supporters began to demand moderation. Finally, he was convicted by a court in July 1794, arrested, and on the next day sent to the guillotine. Now let's see this source D here on the right hand side this box. What is liberty? Two conflicting views. The revolutionary journalist Camille Desmoulins wrote the following in 1793. He was executed shortly after during the Reign of Terror. Some people believe that liberty is like a child, which needs to go through a phase of being disciplined before it attains maturity. Quite the opposite. Liberty is happiness, reason, equality, justice. It is a declaration of rights. You would like to finish off all your enemies by guillotining them. Has anyone heard of something more senseless? Would it be possible to bring a single person to the scaffold without making 10 more enemies among his relations and friends? On 7th February 1794, Robespierre made a speech at the convention, which was then carried by newspaper Le Moniteur Universel. Here is an extract from it. To establish and consolidate democracy, to achieve the peaceful rule of constitutional laws, we must first finish the war of liberty against tyranny. We must annihilate the enemies of the Republic at home and abroad, or else we shall perish. In time of revolution, a democratic government may rely on terror. Terror is nothing but justice, swift, severe, and inflexible, and is used to meet the most urgent needs of the fatherland. To curb the enemies of liberty through terror is the right of the founder of the Republic. Now, this figure, let's see this figure, what this figure says. The revolutionary government sought to mobilize the loyalty of its subjects through various means. One of them was the staging of festivals like this one. Now, this is a festival going on. Symbols from civilizations of ancient Greece and Rome were used to convey the aura of a hallowed history. The pavilion on the raised platform in the middle, carried by classical columns, was made of perishable material that could be dismantled. Here, this one. Okay, that might be dismantled. Describe the groups of people, their clothes, their roles of action. What impression of a revolutionary festival does this image convey? So you can find the answers to these and answer in the comment section, right? Now, next topic. A directory rules France. The fall of the Jacobin government allowed the wealthier middle classes to seize power. A new constitution was introduced which denied the vote to non-proprietor sections of society. It provided for 2 elected legislative councils. These then appointed a directory, an executive made of 5 members. This was meant as a safeguard against the concentration of power in a one-man executive as under the Jacobins. However, the directors often clashed with the legislative councils, who then sought to dismiss them. The political instability of the directory paved the way for the rise of a military dictator, Napoleon Bonaparte. Through all these changes in the form of government, the ideals of freedom, of equality before the law, and of fraternity remained inspiring, ideas that motivated political movements in France and the rest of Europe during the following century. Fourth topic. Did women have a revolution? Before proceeding, let's find out what is this figure says. This figure 12 says, right? So, Parisian women on their way to Versailles. This print is one of the many pictorial representations of the events of 5th October 1789, when women marched to Versailles and brought the king back with them to Paris. Now, from the very beginning, women were active participants in the events which brought about so many important changes in French society. They hoped that their involvement would pressurize the revolutionary government to introduce measures to improve their lives. Most women of the Third Estate had to work for a living. They worked as seamstresses or laundresses, sold flowers, fruits, and vegetables at the market, or were employed as domestic servants in the houses of prosperous people. Most women did not have access to education or job training. Only daughters of nobles or wealthier members of the Third Estate could study at a convent, after which their families arranged a marriage for them. Working women had also to take care for their families, that is, cook, fetch water, queue up for bread, and look after the children. Their wages were lower than those of men. In order to discuss and voice their interests, women started their own political clubs and newspapers. About 60 women's clubs came up in different French cities. The Society of Revolutionary and Republican Women was the most famous of them. One of their main demands was that women enjoy the same political rights as men. Women were disappointed that the Constitution of 1791 reduced them to passive citizens. They demanded the right to vote, to be elected to the assembly, and to hold political office. Only then they felt would their interests be represented in the new government. Because earlier it was only male dominated society. Only male members had a right to vote. Only they were considered as prestigious because they were going out and earning money. But women were also doing the same thing. But they were not getting the same status. So they have to fight, right? So let's see what happens. Now, in the early years, the revolutionary government did introduce laws that helped improve the lives of women. Together with the creation of state schools, schooling was made compulsory for all girls. Now, this was a very good thing. Education was provided. Their fathers could no longer force them into marriage against their will. Now, they were not the family was not allowed to force these girls to marry, right? So they can work, they can study, they can do whatever they want. Marriage was made into a contract entered into freely and registered under civil law. Divorce was made legal and could be applied for by both men and women. Women could now train for jobs, could become artists or run small businesses. Women's struggle for equal political rights, however, continued. During the reign of terror, the new government issued laws ordering closure of women's clubs and banning their political activities. Many prominent women were arrested and a number of them executed. Women's movements for voting rights and equal wages continued through the next 200 years in many countries of the world. The fight for the vote was carried out through an international suffrage movement during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The example of the political activities of French women during the revolutionary years was kept alive as an inspiring memory. It was finally in 1946 that women in France won the right to vote. Now let's see the source E. The Life of a Revolutionary Woman, Olympe de Gouges, 1748 to 1793. Now, Olympe de Gouges was one of the most important of the politically active women in revolutionary France. She protested against the Constitution and the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen as they excluded women from basic rights that each human being was entitled to, right? So in 1791, she wrote a Declaration of the Rights of Woman and Citizen, which she addressed to the Queen and to the members of the National Assembly, demanding that they act upon it. In 1793, Olympe de Gouges criticized the Jacobin government for forcibly closing down women's clubs. She was tried by the National Convention, which charged her with treason. Now, treason, you know, betrayal of one's own country. So she was charged with that. Soon after this, she was executed. So she was captured by the police and she was executed. She was punished because she was raising her voice for something good, right? Now, source F. Some of the basic rights set forth in Olympe de Gouges' declaration. First one. Woman is born free and remains equal to man in rights. Second, the goal of all political associations is the preservation of the natural rights of woman and man. These rights are liberty, property, security, and above all, resistance to oppression. Third, the source of all sovereignty resides in the nation, which is nothing but the union of woman and man. Fourth, the law should be the expression of the general will. All female and male citizens should have a say either personally or by either representatives in its formulation. It should be the same for all. All female and male citizens are equally entitled to all honors and public employment according to their abilities and without any other distinction than that of their talents. Fifth, no woman is an exception. She is accused, arrested, and detained in cases determined by law. Women, like men, obey this rigorous law. Now see this figure 13. Women queuing up at bakery. They have to queue up daily for bread, so as to feed their family. Now let's see the source G as well. In 1793, the Jacobin politician Chaumette sought to justify the closure of women's clubs on the following grounds. Has nature entrusted domestic duties to men? Has she given us breast to nurture babies? No. She has, she said to man, be a man, hunting, agriculture, political duties, that is your kingdom. She said to women, be a woman. The things of the household, the sweet duties of motherhood, those are your tasks. Shameless are those women who wish to become men. Have not duties been fairly distributed? The abolition of slavery. One of the most revolutionary social reforms of the Jacobin regime was the abolition of slavery in the French colonies. The colonies in the Caribbean, Martinique, Guadeloupe, and San Domingo were important suppliers of commodities such as tobacco, indigo, sugar, and coffee. But the reluctance of Europeans to go and work in distant and unfamiliar lands meant a shortage of labor on the plantations. So, this was met by a triangular slave trade between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. The slave trade began in the 17th century. French merchants sailed from the ports of Bordeaux or Nantes to the African coast, where they bought slaves from local chieftains. Branded and shackled, the slaves were packed tightly into ships for 3-month-long voyage across the Atlantic to the Caribbean. Okay, so they were brought from different places to work here, right? There, they were sold to plantation owners. The exploitation of slave labor made it possible to meet the growing demand in European markets for sugar, coffee, and indigo. Port cities like Bordeaux and Nantes owed their economic prosperity to the flourishing slave trade. Throughout the 18th century, there was a little criticism of slavery in France. The National Assembly had long debates about whether the rights of man should be extended to all French subjects, including those in the colonies, but it did not pass any laws, fearing opposition from businessmen whose incomes depended on the slave trade. It was finally the convention which in 1794 legislated to free all slaves in the French overseas possessions. This, however, turned out to be a short-term measure. 10 years later, Napoleon reintroduced slavery. Plantation owners understood their freedom as including the right to enslave African Negroes in pursuit of their economic interests. Slavery was finally abolished in French colonies in 1848. Now, what do you mean by Negro? So, Negroes is a term used for the indigenous people of Africa, south of the Sahara. It is a derogatory term not in common use any longer, right? So, earlier it was used. Then see here, you can see figure 14. The emancipation of slaves. This print in 1794 describes the emancipation of slaves. What is emancipation? The act of freeing, right? So here the slaves are freed. The tricolor banner on the top carries the slogan, the rights of man. The inscription below reads, the freedom of the unfree. A French woman prepares to civilize the African and American Indian slaves by giving them European clothes to wear. Now the next topic, the revolution and everyday life. Can politics change the clothes people wear, the language they speak, or the books they read? The years following 1789 in France saw many such changes in the lives of men, women, and children. The revolutionary government took it upon themselves to pass laws that would translate the ideals of liberty and equality into everyday practice. One important law that came into effect soon after the storming of the Bastille in the summer of 1789 was the abolition of censorship. In the old regime, all written material and cultural activities, books, newspaper, plays, could be published or performed only after they had been approved by the censors of the king, right? So what is censorship? Censorship is that to cut the part of the script or the part of the movie which is not according to the committee, right? So they don't think that it is fit to show to the society, so they censor it. Now the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen proclaims freedom of speech and expression to be a natural right. So now what was declared? That the rights of man and citizen proclaim freedom of speech and expression to be a natural right. Newspapers, pamphlets, books and printed pictures flooded the towns of France from where they travelled rapidly into the countryside. They all described and discussed the events and changes taking place in France. Freedom of the press also meant that opposing views of events could be expressed. Each side sought to convince the others of its position through the medium of print. Plays, songs and festive processions attracted large number of people. This was one way they could grasp and identify with ideas such as liberty or justice that political philosophers wrote about at length in texts which only a handful of educated people could read. Earlier, all the people were not educated, so that is why they are saying handful of people. Now, see, this is figure 15. The patriotic fat-reducing press. This anonymous print of 1790 seeks to make the idea of justice tangible. Now, this figure 16. Murat addressing the people. This is a painting by Louis Leopold Boilly. Recall what you have learned about Murat in this chapter. Describe the scene around him. Account for his great popularity. What kind of reactions would a painting like this produce among viewers in the salon? Now, conclusion. In 1804, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself Emperor of France. He set out to conquer neighboring European countries, dispossessing dynasties and creating kingdoms where he placed members of his family. Napoleon saw his role as the modernizer of Europe. He introduced many laws such as the protection of private property and a uniform system of weights and measures provided by the decimal system. Initially, many saw Napoleon as a liberator who would bring freedom for the people. But soon the Napoleonic armies came to be viewed everywhere as an invading force. He was finally defeated at Waterloo in 1815. Many of his measures that carried the revolutionary ideas of liberty and model laws to other parts of Europe had an impact on people long after Napoleon had left. The ideas of liberty and democratic rights were the most important legacy of the French Revolution. These spread from France to the rest of Europe during the 19th century, where feudal systems were abolished. So let's see this figure 17. This is Napoleon crossing the Alps painting by David. Colonized peoples reworked the idea of freedom from bondage into their movements to create a sovereign nation state. Tipu Sultan and Ram Mohan Roy were two examples of individuals who responded to the ideas coming from the revolutionary France. Now let's read this box 2. Raja Ram Mohan Roy was one of those who was inspired by new ideas that were spreading through Europe at that time. The French Revolution and later, the July Revolution excited his imagination. He could think and talk of nothing else when he heard of the July Revolution in France in 1830. On his way to England at Cape Town, he insisted on visiting frigates, warships, flying the revolutionary tricolour flag, though he had been temporarily lamed by an accident. So here we come to the end of this chapter. Thank you.